Well, hello, everyone. And I know some of you might be thinking, ugh, this guy again. Well, one of the things we're doing with the This Is Church series is we're going to hear from a number of other people about what their church experience has been like, how it has been a blessing to them. And I'm excited to do that for the first time here today. So please give a listen to my friend John here as he talks about the blessing that he has received by being a part of a church.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to share a couple thoughts that I have on the church. Back in the pandemic, everybody knows that everything was closed, including churches, and I was looking for a church at the time, and I spoke to a friend of mine, and he recommended Rolling Hills Church, and I agreed, and I went, and I have to say, from the time I walked in the door, I felt the love, the acceptance. It was an amazing thing. The people there at this church, they were so welcoming, and they felt like brothers and sisters that I haven't seen for a long time, and it was just an amazing thing. And all these years later, and it's still the same way every time I walk in those same doors. It was just a blessing. I've received blessings through the church. I've received blessings from God through the church. They're there for you. They were there for me, and I'm so thankful. And I would recommend praying about it. Find yourself a church that teaches the word, that shares in the love, in the fellowship, and the service to community. It's just an amazing thing, and I would recommend it to anybody. And it's being a part of something is so much bigger than any of us. It's well worth it. But if you're feeling the weight of the world on you and on your shoulders, and things are tough, the church is there for you. I mean, you can experience the love and joy of Jesus even through the hard times, even through that pressure. And it's what they're there for, to serve, to be the hands and feet of Jesus, to serve the community, to serve each other. It's just amazing. It's a blessing that is just waiting to be accepted by everyone. And I would hope that you pray about it and you find the right church, like the one that I mentioned that I attend. It's just a true blessing. Let yourself be led and give glory to Jesus. He deserves all the credit. And, well, have a blessed day in the Lord. Amen.
So one of the things we see in the book of James, we've been going through the book here since the beginning of the year, is one of the things we see is a way to live out a practical, every single day kind of faith. It's about putting flesh onto our faith. And already we have seen how faith helps us to hear and do the will of God. Faith will help us to show mercy. Faith brings us to living it out. It's not just about something that we believe, but it's something that we practice. A faith that can bring us to a place where we can better control our words and our tongue. And today we look to how faith helps us see how much better God's wisdom is than the supposed wisdom of this world. And it certainly seems to me that there is a difference between God's wisdom and the world's wisdom. And it's, I think, never been more pronounced maybe than it is right now. Look at the things that the world says is wise. We should accept that we are all here by a series of chances, the probability of which each and every one of them occurring by themselves, let alone being together and being able to support life, the probability of that calculated, we cannot even understand that type of number. The world says it is wise to understand that there are 72 different genders. 72 genders. I was going to show a picture of all of the different types of genders that people recognize now, but I'll spare you that. Look it up online sometime if you want to find out how there are 72 genders, if you want to be stupefied. The wisdom of this world tells us that mothers of children conceived through IVF should now be referred to as inseminated person and not a mother. Because we don't want to, obviously we think that men can become mothers, so we have to refer to the one that gives birth as an inseminated person. That's the wisdom of the world. Worldly wisdom tells you, you do you, because you are all that matters. Your happiness is of the greatest importance. Worldly wisdom tells you that you should save and hoard and keep your possessions only for yourselves. Worldly wisdom tells us that those who are too young, those who are too old, those who are too disabled, they have a lesser value than one of us quote-unquote normal people, and therefore it's okay to take their lives, because if someone cannot be like me, then is that person even living? We can go on, pointing out the ways that this world makes sense to those who are not of God, and how to those who are of God, how that supposed wisdom will only bring someone into greater sin and rebellion against God. So once again, James seeks to help us have this practical view of things, and through these couple of verses that we're going to look at this morning, we see four big ways in which God's wisdom is different from man's or the world's. And know that James is certainly not the only one who sees this difference between godly and worldly wisdom. The book of Proverbs is covered with examples of how there is a great divide between the two. The first 11 chapters of Proverbs deals a lot with wisdom, and how godly wisdom is something that we ask for and receive from God himself. I don't think I gave you the verses. Did I, Alex? Did you get the verses for this week? Or there's a bunch of other verses other than James. So Proverbs 1:7, if you want to write this one down. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline. The beginning of wisdom is not the ability to understand, to be able to read fast, to be witty. The start line of wisdom is the fear, the honor, the respect, the awe of God. Recognizing that real wisdom comes only from God above, and those who are foolish, who do not fear the Lord, his ways will never make sense to them. So in the same way that we look at the wisdom of this world and think, what are you people thinking? Someone who is not of God is going to look at us and think, what are you people thinking? It's going to be foolishness to them, because the ways of this world are foolishness to God. Proverbs 4:7. Wisdom is supreme, so get wisdom. And whatever else you get understanding. We also read here that we are encouraged or expected to get wisdom. Knowing Solomon's story, and that he either wrote or compiled many of the Proverbs found in this book, it's not surprising that we would find something like this here. When God said to Solomon, "Ask for anything, and I will grant it." I'm sure each and every one of us could think of a lot of things that we would say to God, oh yeah, if you're going to give me anything, God, this is what I want. What did Solomon do? He asked for wisdom, true wisdom, God's wisdom. And because he asked for that, what did God do? With God's wisdom, Solomon was able to gain everything else in life, at least for a time. 1 Corinthians 3:19. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. Since it is written, He catches the wise in their craftiness. Paul is writing to the Corinthian church and tells them the wisdom of this world is like foolishness to God. Have you ever encountered this in life? Where someone thinks that he or she is saying something so novel, so different, so new, or so revolutionary, and yet it's just sin and the same thoughts that have been with mankind for thousands of years. I remember once having a discussion with someone that I worked with. He and his wife were having some struggles in their marriage, and they were getting some therapy to help save their marriage, and he's relaying to me that he was seeing some therapist, and this therapist was kind of a jabroni. And if you know what that word, he's like, a jabroni is like, yeah, you don't want to be a jabroni, huh? So this guy, he's telling them, giving them just some horrible wisdom. They're going to get some therapy to save their marriage. And he was told that it's important that he looks out for himself, that he thinks more of himself than anyone else, that he should take a vacation without his wife to get his mind cleared. What was their struggle? They had been together for 3 years at that point, and they simply hit that point where they needed to see that marriage was more than just, quote unquote, being in love with each other. There wasn't a break of trust, no tumultuous upheaval in their lives. They were simply at the point of realizing that the norms of married life have set in, and now love has to turn from a fleeting feeling to a conscious choice. And so after hearing what this guy who was thinking that this was the greatest wisdom he had ever heard because it was all about him, I had to talk with him. And I said in a very direct, non-pastoral way, there is a term for what this therapist was giving you, this advice that he was giving you. It's called selfishness. And no marriage is ever going to survive with selfishness as its goal. And so to illustrate this, I asked him, tell me the reasons why you married your wife in the first place. And he said the things like, she made me feel good when I was around her, and I laughed a lot when I was with her. She understood me. And so I stopped him after a couple of answers, and I just asked him, okay, look at the things that you just said. They were all about you. He said nothing about her. There is a difference between saying, she makes me laugh, or she is a joy to be around. There's a subtle difference there, but it's a significant difference. One is about you, and the other is about the other person. And so it was like one of those things where he's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Like, yeah, I am thinking a lot of myself. This couple went on to have 2 children. They live in Murraysville now. They're still together. I haven't been in any real contact with him in years other than on Facebook. But it wasn't because of anything that I said. It was because of the wisdom of God coming to bear against the supposed wisdom of this world, and God's ways prevailing, because the wisdom of this world is simply foolishness or sin to God. Okay, so on to James. James 3, verse 13. Who among you is wise and understanding? By his good conduct he should show that his works are done in the gentleness that comes from wisdom. Last week I spoke about controlling our words and how at the first part of controlling these words, it was directed towards teachers, and that they need to make sure that they are teaching the true word of God, because they are going to be judged more strictly. And so some people will read these last couple verses of James 3 as only pertaining to teachers, but I don't believe that's the point. It doesn't let everybody off the hook. What we have in this part of the chapter are 2 different pictures that are being drawn for us of wisdom. James begins to understand the first picture, or he begins to describe the first picture of wisdom. There we go. A wise person, why did that just crash? Let me do this. Sorry about this. That I think is last week's sermon. There. True wisdom is demonstrated through humility and good conduct. That's one of the pictures we see of wisdom. True wisdom is described with humility and good conduct. Notice that oftentimes when we think of someone as being wise, it is because of the way that they speak. They communicate good and stuff, is what we might say. Whether it is through their spoken words or their written words, people tend to ascribe a level of wisdom to someone if he or she is an effective communicator. What does God's word show us, though? True wisdom is shown through good conduct, not just by what you say, but how you live. I've seen this numerous times in different people, and especially online, where someone comes across as wise, and I'm not denying their intelligence or anything, but when you hear their words and then look at their lives, there is a disconnect. They sound intelligent, but their lives are depraved. That is not wise. That is not godly wisdom. You see, wisdom, true godly wisdom, is seen in our actions. Just like faith is seen through our words, so also wisdom is seen through your actions. You can have someone who can execute these great literary feats through their words. They can make very sound, convincing arguments for something, even biblically based arguments. But if their lives do not line up with their words, are we actually going to listen to them? Of course not. To steal a metaphor from Paul, when someone speaks one way and lives another way, or even speaks with this haughty, arrogant tone, that person is listened to as much as a clanging cymbal is enjoyed. Now, I'm a drummer and I love a good cymbal. But when someone is playing a drum set and doesn't know how cymbals are supposed to be used, no matter how great the rhythm is, it's the clanging of a cymbal and it'll just ruin it. Now, I was going to act this out in person and I forgot to pull this video up. So, Eli, very quickly, if you can go to YouTube and search for a video called, I don't know what we would call it, Hyper Drummer Playing Oceans. Look that up. I was going to act this out, but I thought, no, you know what? It's better if you see this video and hear it. This video that we're going to show is an example of clanging cymbals. Do you know the video, Alex? Okay, can you help pull that up and go ahead and show that? That sounds right. Yep, that's her. Yeah, go ahead and just play that one. Maybe turn it down a little bit. They'll show them, don't worry. All right. So, a couple things here. I guarantee you there was a teenager that was in the back controlling the camera, and he's like, oh, I got to get this. And so he like slowly zooms out, and you can see the guy just going off on the drums here. And if you're looking at the video like on your screen, you can tell the looks that keyboardist is trying to contain. Like, she's about to just say something, and she's like, what is this? It's a popular worship song. We've sung it here, and I realized that, by playing that, it might ruin the song, because now when you hear the intro, you're going to be waiting for Alex or Leroy and just go off like that. But when our words and our lives do not line up with each other, we sound like that to people. And I can tell you, knowing drummers and musicians, there was someone in the congregation that morning where the drummer is like, yeah, I'm gonna pop off here. And he was trying to impress someone. But did the music and the rhythm work together? Of course not. Do my actions line up with my words? If I have true wisdom, they will. Does my conduct show humility? If not, then realize I do not have true godly wisdom. And so now we're going to start to fill in the rest of the picture here of worldly wisdom. Verses 14 through 16, please. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your heart, don't boast and deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there is disorder and every evil practice. Everything that God is opposite who we are in our sin-stained selves. He is good, we are not. He is just, we are not. He is righteous, we are not. He is wise, we are not. He is the standard, not you or me. So if we try to define something like wisdom according to the standard of our own lives, this world or our experiences or even our own thoughts, we will never be able to achieve true wisdom, godly wisdom, until we use the correct standard. Wisdom does not come from ourselves. One commentator wrote this: there is a wisdom that comes from hell. It's of the devil. Yes, it's worldly wisdom. It's earthly. But the problem goes even deeper than the earth. This kind of wisdom is the complete antithesis of anything that is from God. It is subtly yet powerfully demonic. In Genesis 3, the serpent tempted Eve to trust in his wisdom instead of God's wisdom. And the adversary is doing the same thing in every single one of our lives today. This is where we need to remember one of the most important factors in our growth in wisdom is our perspective. Worldly wisdom views life from a limited perspective. It doesn't see things in light of eternity, but in terms of the perceived immediate impact. What is best for self-advancement and self-pleasure now? And this is a dangerous way to live, and it's motivated entirely by self-centered ambition. A wisdom in the world measures everything by how it affects you. It's concerned with how do you advance yourself, promote yourself, or assert yourself. When looking at conversations or circumstances, the question at the forefront is always, what can I get out of this? That's worldly wisdom. James says that is from the devil. Remember that the favoritism that James confronted in chapter 2, a favoritism that was driven by nothing but self-centered ambition. People were ignoring the poor because they could not get anything from them. This kind of wisdom is common in the world, and it is natural in us. but we don't even see it. Self-centered ambition is not the root of struggles in marriage. Like, people will ask that, no, that's not what I'm dealing with. I don't see that in my life. But they will say things like, what is best for me? Is this not the root of the entire American dream? Climb the ladder, achieve your goals, assert yourself, promote yourself, advance yourself. Meanwhile, Jesus says, deny yourself. Self-centered ambition is at the heart of worldly wisdom, and it is demonic. It is filled with envy, always comparing itself to others to see who's better and who's worse. James says this results in disorder and evil. In a home that is marked by self-centered ambition, you will have disorder and evil. In a church that is filled with men and women who are driven by self-centered ambition, you will have a recipe for disorder and evil. There is a danger in all of our families and in all of our churches that whenever we pursue selfish concerns and partisan causes to the neglect of the good of others, we are going to bring that place to destruction. And so we need to be on guard. Because this worldly wisdom that we see here, it produces things like anger and bitterness and resentment and divisions and divorce. That kind of wisdom robs us of love and intimacy and trust and fellowship and harmony with others. So look at the right side of the screen now. I think there's one other one. There we go. Disorder and evil practice. Look at the right side of the screen. Worldly wisdom will bring us bitter envy. Why? Because the wisdom of this world is ultimately about self. And if someone has something I do not, then I am envious of it. It's the wise thing to do according to the world. Be envious, because you want that. You want to take it. Selfish ambition. Clearly, again, that speaks to the desire to promote self over all else. Worldly wisdom is not just a natural state of things. It comes from the pits of hell and is entirely against God and is demonic in its core. So does this help us to understand then why the world is the way it is sometimes? Why the longer we walk with God, the less this world makes sense to us. Worldly wisdom creates disorder and evil. I said a few minutes ago that the world is opposite God because the standard is off. Look at that last characteristic of worldly wisdom. It's at the bottom there, disorder and evil practice. Now that we're going to go back to Genesis 1, to the very beginning, Genesis 1, verses 1 to 4, with that disorder and evil practice in mind. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We're pretty familiar with that part. We probably just read that a few months ago, starting up our yearly Bible reading plan. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness covered the surface of the watery depths. Those words, formless and empty, we have this picture maybe of like a blank slate or something like that, or perhaps a mound of clay waiting to be formed. But that's not what the Hebrew paints a picture of here. In Hebrew, we have this great phrase. It says tohu vabohu. And it's the first, that first word, that tohu, is also used to describe confusion and chaos and vanity and emptiness. And then that second word kind of repeats some of those descriptions, as it's a word about having a void or emptiness. It's a wasteland. So it gives us this picture of like coming across a ruin in the woods, and there is nothing left identifying it anymore, but you kind of see something there. That's the world in a state of disorder, chaos, and evil. That's what this world was until God got a hold of it. And then what? Genesis 1, finishing verse 2. The Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. The world was evil, but God made something good. The world was chaotic, but God made something good. He didn't take what was there and make it better. He had to create something in order for it to be good. His creation is good. The world is formless. It is void. It is in a state of chaos. And it is evil. So what about true wisdom then? Going back to James 3, 17 to 18. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without pretense. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who cultivate peace. Now look at this, folks. Which kind of person do you want in your life? One who is chaotic and evil, or one who is described with humility and good conduct and pure and peace-loving, compliant, full of mercy, has good fruits, is unwavering, has no pretense, and that person grows in peace? Who would you rather have in your life? What would you rather have describe you? If it's the latter, then the only way to have that is to look to God for it. What we need is godly wisdom that comes from heaven. So this takes us back to the beginning of James, James 1, 5 and 6, where we read, "Now if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and without criticizing, and it will be given to him." You do not get this wisdom from intellectual effort or practical experience as much as you get it from being with God. A kind of wisdom, a godly wisdom, sees things from an eternal perspective that can only come from God. We must go to Him constantly in prayer and in the Word, crying out to Him to receive His wisdom. This is the point of Proverbs, chapter 2, 1 through 8. We read this, Proverbs 2, 1 through 8. "My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, listening closely to wisdom and directing your heart to understanding. Furthermore, if you call out to insight and lift your voice to understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it like hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and then discover the knowledge of God." Again, first comes the fear of the Lord. For the Lord gives wisdom. From His mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up success for the upright. He is a shield for those who live with integrity, so that He may guard the paths of justice and protect the way of His faithful followers. Individually and corporately, we need to go to God to pray for wisdom. We ought to be desperate for it, is what we read. All believers should have the attitude of Solomon, who confessed that he was too young when first called upon to be a king, and so he needed God's help. And so only God can give that wisdom, which is why godly wisdom is motivated then by God-centered humility. In contrast to the disorder and the evil that result from selfish ambition, James says in verse 18 that the wisdom from God results in peace and righteousness. God's wisdom produces that which is right, that which is pleasing, that which is honoring to God, and that which is good for the people of God. We read from Jesus, Matthew 5:9, "The peacemakers are blessed, for they will be called sons of God." Peace is what God desires in our relationships. Peace is what He wants in our homes, in our churches. Now, this is not peace at the expense of truth. I'm not saying like kumbaya here, we all need to get along type of thing by avoiding truth and conviction. It's pure, like we see in James here. It's true. It's trusting that purity produces peace. Think about how the peace that James talks about plays out in your home. If a husband and a wife are humbly going before God and pursuing wisdom that is pure and honoring to God, it produces peace in their home. This happens also in church. When men and women are humbly going before God, leaving self-centered ambition behind and pursuing wisdom that is pure, it produces peacemaking and righteousness in that church. It doesn't mean that you always agree on every single detail, but it does mean that together you are humbly seeking God's wisdom and putting aside selfish ambition. We need to ask God to remove from us the worldly thinking and worldly wisdom. Humble ourselves before Him and ask Him to give you wisdom that is first pure and then peace-loving and gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, without favoritism or hypocrisy. And pray that He would use you not to sow disorder, but to be a harvest of peace and righteousness in your relationships with other people. This passage contrasts the wisdom that comes from God with the wisdom of this world, which is characterized with envy and selfish ambition. Christians can find clarity and direction in their lives by seeking God's wisdom, especially during times of confusion or moral ambiguity. This wisdom helps believers focus on love, on peace, on righteousness, impacting their relationships and decision-making. We see that true wisdom is demonstrated through good conduct and humbleness, while earthly wisdom leads to disorder and strife. And obviously, Jesus embodies this heavenly wisdom. His teaching reflects a deep understanding of God's will. He contrasts with the world's philosophies, and He exemplifies humility and righteousness, guiding all of us to seek divine wisdom, God's wisdom. So I pray that we would be able to embrace God's wisdom, which brings peace and righteousness, as opposed to the worldly wisdom that leads to chaos and strife. And so James wrote, as I said before, 1:5, "If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him." Ask God. Are there things in your life right now that you need God's wisdom to deal with? Ask Him for it. Are there decisions that need to be made that you need God's wisdom for? Ask Him for that wisdom. Ask for His wisdom. Do you need to surrender your life to Him so that you can begin to build this new foundation of wisdom in your life with God as the standard, not the world as the standard? Ask Him to be your Lord and Savior. Confess your sins, do the wise thing, and surrender to Him. Do your actions and your words not line up like they should? Are you a clanging cymbal to those around you? Come to God and ask Him to change that in you. So what I want to do as we prepare our hearts for communion, I want to invite Chandler, if you want to come up and start playing some music to help us just think about the things that God might want us to go to Him for and ask in prayer. So what we're going to do, I'll ask our